The story begins in the most unlikely of places, a busy construction site where a tiny, helpless cry echoed through the heavy rumble of machinery. No one knew where it came from until a worker paused, crouched down, and spotted the smallest, most fragile ball of fur wedged between a pile of wooden planks. Her tiny paws kept reaching out as if begging for comfort, but no mother cat was anywhere in sight. The lead worker, unsure what to do, made a call that would end up becoming the beginning of something incredible. On the other end of that call was a woman named Jessica, a longtime foster volunteer for animals in need. Then, in the most heart-melting moment imaginable, Tuck slowly leaned down and gave Olive a lick so gentle, it barely moved a single hair. That was it. Wherever Tuck went, Olive was right there, either perched between his front paws, nestled in his fluffy neck fur, or sometimes even hitching a ride on his broad back, like a tiny queen riding her royal steed. This kitten didn't just tolerate a dog. She chose a dog to be her mother, protector, and best friend, and Tuck embraced the role with his whole heart. If Olive meowed in the middle of the night, Tuck was the first to get up, nudging Jessica awake as if saying, "She needs something." One clip showed Olive pawing at Tuck's face until he laid down, only for her to curl up on top of his head like it was a throne. And in a hilarious but heartwarming role reversal, the tiny kitten would crawl onto Tuck's giant paws, purring loudly, as if saying, "Don't worry, Mom's got you." They would stay like that, wrapped around each other, proving that love doesn't care about size, species, or logic. Another showed her attempting to mimic Tuck's deep, thunderous barks with her tiny, barely audible mews, an effort that had viewers around the world laughing until tears streamed down their faces. When Olive tried to explore places too high or too dangerous, Tuck would carefully block her path with his body, or gently guide her away with his massive nose. People asked for photos, kids giggled in disbelief, and even grumpy strangers couldn't help but smile when they saw the two together. One person commented online, "This is exactly the kind of story that restores my faith in the world." He was patient, endlessly gentle, and so ridiculously attentive, it felt like watching a parent with their own baby. But within weeks, the account had hundreds of thousands of followers. She still curled up beneath his chin at night, still rode on his back when tired, and still demanded morning kisses from her big fluffy mom. And Tuck, ever patient, ever loving, never stopped looking at her with the same gentle eyes he did the day they met. Brands reached out, wanting to feature them in commercials. Pet food companies offered sponsorships. Late-night talk shows invited Jessica and the furry duo for guest appearances. But through it all, what mattered most wasn't the fame, or the viral fame. It was the love between a tiny kitten who chose her own destiny, the gentle giant who embraced her as his own. Olive had been abandoned, fragile, and alone, destined to struggle without her mother. Tuck had been rescued years earlier from a neglectful situation, left with emotional scars that only time and love could heal. It's a living reminder that sometimes, the family you choose turns out to be the very best kind of family there is. But together, they filled each other's missing pieces. When Tuck ate, Olive sat beside him, occasionally stealing bites from his bowl, despite it being 50 times bigger than her. But because Tuck showed her what it looked like, it reminded people everywhere that family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes, family finds you in the most unexpected ways, and sometimes, it comes in the form of a tiny kitten who looks up at a 135-pound dog and decides, "That's my mom." And Tuck, this big, stoic, gentle giant, seemed to rediscover his own playful spirit through Olive. He wasn't just her protector. He became her jungle gym, her heater, her shade on hot days, and her refuge when the world seemed too big. At bedtime, she refused to sleep anywhere but tucked directly under Tuck's chin, wrapped in warmth and safety. Bond sealed. From that moment on, Olive was no longer a foster. She was family. Jessica rushed to the scene and took the tiny kitten home, unsure whether she'd even make it through the night. This tiny ball of fluff had the heart of a lion, bold and fearless. Maybe it was because she'd been raised by a dog the size of a small bear, but she had absolutely no concept of her own size. She would challenge the vacuum cleaner, pounce on Tuck's wagging tail like it was a wild animal, and even attempt to wrestle with Tuck's massive ears, which she treated like her personal playground. The kitten, later named Olive, was so small that she fit perfectly in the palm of a hand. Picture this, a massive white Great Pyrenees trotting through the park with a tiny gray kitten clinging to his back like a tiny superhero. People would stop in their tracks. Jaws dropped, phones whipped out instantly. Videos flooded TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. The captions practically wrote themselves. Tiny kitten picks 135-pound dog to be her mom, one video declared, and within hours it exploded across the internet. Her meows were faint but desperate, a sound of both fear and determination. Barely bigger than a coffee mug, the kitten was trembling, eyes wide, fur matted, and ribs clearly visible. There, sprawled across the living room floor like a giant fluffy rug, was Tuck, a massive 135-pound Great Pyrenees rescue dog. Tuck was the definition of gentle giant. Despite his enormous size, he had the softest, kindest soul. Over the years, Tuck had seen many fosters come and go, puppies, rabbits, even injured birds, and had always been a calm, comforting presence. But nothing prepared Jessica for what was about to happen when she walked through that door, carrying Olive. Abandoned, cold, and alone. The odds of survival seemed impossibly slim. The tiny kitten, still trembling, locked eyes with this enormous dog, and without hesitation, hobbled forward on her wobbly little legs. Jessica expected her to be scared, maybe even hide. But no. Olive marched right up to Tuck's massive paws, stared up at him, and let out the squeakiest meow. A meow that said one thing loud and clear. You are my mom now. But what happened next defied every law of nature and melted the hearts of millions who would later witness it unfold online. This wasn't just another rescue story. This was the start of an unbreakable, unexpected bond that would change two lives forever. When the workers carefully lifted the kitten out, they realized she was barely a few weeks old. But the real surprise waited back at Jessica's home. As soon as Tuck's eyes met Olive's, something clicked. Tuck blinked, lowered his gigantic head, and sniffed her gently, his big nose practically engulfing her entire tiny body. What followed became something straight out of a fairy tale. Jessica couldn't believe what she was seeing. As Olive grew stronger, her personality blossomed. But the most viral, internet-breaking moments came whenever Tuck and Olive ventured outside. Millions watched as Olive boldly strutted around like she owned the world, always with Tuck a few steps behind as her bodyguard. But the most touching moments were the quiet ones. When thunderstorms rolled in, Olive wasn't the one hiding. Tuck was. Jessica often caught herself just sitting and watching them, marveling at how this unlikely pair found exactly what they needed in one another. As time passed, their bond only deepened. Olive learned how to be gentle, how to trust, and how to love unconditionally. Not because of instinct, their story wasn't just a cute internet sensation. It became a beacon of hope for millions who watched it unfold. Everywhere they went, whether it was the vet's office, the park, or a pet-friendly cafe, they were greeted like celebrities. Jessica eventually started an Instagram page dedicated to Tuck and Olive, thinking it might bring a few smiles to friends and family. Even as Olive grew, she never outgrew her role as Tuck's little shadow. Their story continues to inspire millions around the world, proving that love knows no boundaries, no sizes, and certainly no species.